Hi, this is Miss Wright, and I am sharing my annotations for page 863 through 865 of our reading on Odysseus. I'm in the section called Sailing from Troy. And it says, 10 years after the Trojan War, Odysseus departs from the goddess Calypso's island. He arrives in Phaeacia, ruled by Alcinous. Alcinous offers a ship to Odysseus and asks him to tell of his adventures. And for this section, I put two annotations. Calypso is a nymph in love with Odysseus, and um, Alcinous is a king to whom Odysseus tells his adventures. I also found an example of Anna diplosis because this sentence ends with the same word that this sentence begins with. Okay, this is Odysseus speaking. I am Laertes' son, Odysseus. Men hold me formidable for guile in peace and war. This fame has gone abroad to the sky's rim. My home is on the peaked sea mark of Ithaca, under Mount Neon's wind-blown robe of leaves, in sight of other islands, Dulichium, Same, wooded Zacynthus, Ithaca being most lofty in that coastal sea and northwest, while the rest lie east and south, a rocky isle, but good for a boy's training. I shall not see on earth a place more dear, though I have been detained long by Calypso, loveliest among the goddesses, who held me in her smooth cave to be her heart's delight. As Circe of Aea, the enchantress, desired me and detained me in her hall, but in my heart I never gave consent. Where shall a man find sweetness to surpass his own home and his parents? In far lands he shall not, though he find a house of gold. What of my sailing then from Troy? I'm going to stop and back up. Okay, so the first thing we have is that Odysseus identifies himself. And he identifies himself by saying who his father is. Because in this culture, who your father is makes a big difference. It's a big deal. So his father is the famous king Laertes, and people would know who Laertes is. So he identifies himself as the son of this man. And I put here for my notes, Odysseus reveals himself to the king, to King Alcinous. When he says, men hold me formidable, a formidable opponent is a challenging opponent, a worthy opponent. So what do they hold him worthy for or challenging for? Guile. He's known for deceiving people. Remember, he is a trickster character, so he is known for deceiving people. And then it says he acknowledges that he is famous. His name is known far and wide. So when it says it's gone abroad to the sky's rim, the sky's rim would have been the horizon, and so it would have been gone as far as people could see, as far as people would know. Mount Neon, Dulichium, Same, Zacynthus, these are real places, and this is a way of authenticating where he comes from, where Ithaca is, that it can be found by using these landmarks. And he describes Ithaca as a rocky island, good for a boy's training. So young boy growing up on this island, running up and down, would be in really great shape, ready for battle, uh, growing up on the island of Ithaca. And it says, I have been detained long by Calypso. That's the goddess that's in love with him. In fact, she held him on her island for 7 years and she offers him immortality. She did not want to let him go. But because, as we read in the previous selection, it was not his destiny to die on that island, it was his destiny to get home, she has to let him go. Okay. And so when it says to be her heart's delight, she is in love with him. She does not want to have him released. Circe of Aea is another goddess here, enchantress or um, a witch, someone who has the ability to put a spell on a man, has detained him in her hall. In fact, he's with her for 1 year. He's with her for a whole year and um, doesn't want to let him go, but in fact, she's told that she must let him go also. And it says here, very importantly, but in my heart, I never gave consent. So Odysseus is saying, I was never in love with either one of these women. They were powerful, they were goddesses, they wanted to keep me and have me live forever, but I was never in love with them. So in his heart, um, he always wanted to return home to Penelope, his wife. In far lands he shall not. So here's the rhetorical question, right? Where shall a man find sweetness to surpass his own home and his parents? That's a rhetorical question. So, where shall a man find something better than his home and his parents? In what land will a man find something better than his home and his parents? And the answer comes back. He answers himself by saying, in far lands he shall not. So you think you're going to go somewhere and find something better than your home and your parents? No, not even if you were to find a house of gold. It would not be better. So I put this means that there's no place like home. And if you think about the Wizard of Oz and other stories where people take a great journey and ultimately find out that home was the best place of all, they're all drawing from this archetype, from this model um, of the hero's journey, where one finds out that home is the ultimate place after all. Okay, now Odysseus begins to talk about the first stop after the Trojan War. So it says, what of my sailing then from Troy? What of those years of rough adventure weathered under Zeus? The wind that carried west from Ilium brought me to Ismarus on the far shore, a strong point on the coast of the Cyclones. I stormed that place and killed the men who fought. Plunder we took and we enslaved the women to make division, equal shares to all. But on that spot I told them, back and quickly. So Ilium, as it says in the margin notes, is another name for Troy. So whenever you see the name Ilium, we're talking about Troy. Isthmus is the first stop after Troy. So on this map, here's Troy, where they fought the Trojan War. They get in their ships, and instead of sailing this way, they actually follow the coastline because they need fresh water and provisions. They stop at Ismarus, and instead of finding out if these people are friendly, not friendly, they just attack them and um, capture the women, basically make sex slaves out of the women, and it becomes their undoing. So we have, I stormed that place and killed the men who fought. Plunder we took. So they take whatever is valuable, including they enslaved the women and they divided up the women, equal shares to all, right? Um, But on that spot, I told him, so it's almost as though Odysseus has a type of a premonition. So I have in my margin notes, Odysseus and his men are still in battle mode. They are bloodthirsty. They attack without thinking. Next page, it says, out again. This is Odysseus's voice. He wants his men to get back on their boats. My men were mutinous, fools on stores of wine. Sheep after sheep they butchered. by the surf and shambling cattle feasting, while fugitives went inland, running to call to arms the main force of the Cyclones. This was an army trained to fight on horseback or where the ground required on foot. They came with dawn over the terrain like leaves and blades of spring. So doom appeared to us, dark word of Zeus for us, our evil days. My men stood up and made a fight of it, backed on the ships with lances kept in play, from bright morning through the blaze of noon, holding our beach, although so far outnumbered. But when the sun passed towards unyoking time, then the Achaeans, one by one, gave way. 6 benches were left empty in every ship that evening when we pulled away from death, and this new grief we bore with us to sea. Our precious lives we had, but not our friends. No ship made sail next day until some shipmate had raised a cry 3 times for each poor ghost unfleshed by the Cyclones on that field. Okay, we have lots of annotations here. Things in my notes I have. His men wouldn't listen to him. When it says they were mutinous, they wanted to keep partying. They were basically having, a barbecue on the beach with these women that they had enslaved also. So they were partying, having good time after 10 years of battle. They felt like they deserved, a celebration. However, Odysseus has this premonition and he wants them to get back on the ships, but they're drunk. It says they were fools on stores of wine, so they're not listening to him. And how do I know they're having a barbecue? Because they're butchering sheep by the surf, and they're butchering cattle, so they're probably roasting them on open fires and having a good time. Meanwhile, they're not paying attention. Some of the Cyclones had escaped, and they go running back to the main force of the Cyclones. And they come the next morning with an army. So some people had escaped. I put that in my margin notes. And an army came the next morning. I put that in my margin notes. This was an army trained to fight on horseback or where the ground required on foot. So these are very skilled soldiers. They came with the dawn over the terrain like the leaves and blades of spring. And I put that means a lot of soldiers came, because if you think of how many blades of grass are in just your lawn, or how many trees are on one leaves, we're talking about thousands of soldiers came over the hill the next morning. That's why he says, so doom appeared to us. Dark word of Zeus for us. And I also put in my margin notes that that's an example of epistrophe. Epistrophe is when a line or phrases, consecutive phrases, end with the same word. So the us and the us is an example of epistrophe. Down here I have, when the sun passed towards unyoking time. Unyoking time means the time to put the animals away. In the morning, you yoke the animals and you plow your field. In the evening, you take the yoke off and put the animals back in the barn. So it's a figurative way of talking about the end of the day. Achaeans, we know, is another name for Greeks. Achaeans is another name for Greeks. We pulled away from death, and there he's saying that because so many people died that day. It says 6 benches were left empty in every ship that evening when we pulled away from death, and this new grief we bore. Grief and death are going to be motifs that follow throughout. We bore. I put motifs in my margin notes. Our precious lives we had, but not our friends. This is a formula that will come back to us throughout the reading, meaning it's a line that repeats. And no shipmate sailed next day until some shipmate had raised a cry 3 times for each poor ghost unfleshed by the Cyclones. And I put that was imagery, because the idea of being unfleshed, removed from your own flesh, and of course it means death. Okay, I will have to continue on the video, and I hope this is some help to you. Make sure you are thinking deeply, annotating, and picking up on the theme, the motifs, and the tone of each selection. Shout out to my super students. I will see you back in class, and do your best with the readings, okay? Bye.